I hadn't meant to find her. Not really. The rain had turned the streets slick and reflective, and I was only trying to cut through the alley behind the gallery. But there she was, framed in the tall window, shoulders slightly turned, sleeves rolled up, restoring an old painting like she was coaxing it back to life. Light gathered around her hands. For a moment, I forgot I was supposed to keep walking. Clara. My friend's mother. She hadn't changed as much as I thought she would. Or maybe she had, just in quieter ways. Her hair was shorter now, the kind of cut that said she'd stopped trying to impress anyone but herself. The same calm, unhurried poise that used to fill a room when I was a kid still lingered, only now it made me hesitate before breathing. When she looked up, I froze. "You always did know how to find me," she said through the glass, smiling like she already knew why I was there, even though I didn't. The door creaked open before I could think. Inside, it smelled faintly of varnish and rain-damp wood. She wiped her hands on a linen cloth, studying me with that patient curiosity she had, like she was trying to decide which version of me had shown up. "Eli," she said softly, "you look older." "So do you," I replied too quickly, then wished I hadn't. But she just laughed, low, quiet, the sound barely touching the air before slipping away. We talked about nothing for a while, the weather, the gallery, the kind of things people say when they're trying not to acknowledge what's pulsing under the surface. Every few sentences, her eyes would meet mine and stay there half a second too long. I tried not to read into it, but my pulse didn't listen. When she passed me a cup of tea, her fingers brushed mine, just lightly, and my body reacted before my mind caught up. The air between us thickened, heavy with the kind of silence that doesn't need to be broken. She noticed, of course. Clara always noticed. "You still fidget when you're nervous," she said, watching the way I tapped the rim of my cup. "And you still point it out," I answered, half smiling. Her lips curved, but her eyes stayed serious, like there was a question she didn't want to ask yet. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, I could hear the small hum of the heater, the faint scrape of her chair against the wood floor. Everything else felt too still, too aware. I caught myself watching the way she moved, slow, deliberate, never wasted. When she leaned closer to adjust the lamp, a strand of her hair brushed my arm. She didn't move away immediately. Neither did I. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. "How am I looking at you?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Like you don't remember who I am." But I did. Too well. Every version of her, the warm laughter at family dinners, the soft voice asking if I was eating enough at school, the quiet woman at the edge of rooms who always seemed a little apart from everyone else. I remembered all of it, and the memory made it worse. The space between us folded into something fragile, electric. I wanted to say something, to ask if she was happy now, or if she ever thought about that night years ago when I'd caught her crying in the kitchen. But before I could speak, the door behind us opened. A rush of cold air swept in, carrying wet leaves and footsteps. She turned sharply toward the sound. And just like that, the moment was gone, left hanging between us, unfinished, like a sentence neither of us had the courage to complete. The person at the door only stayed a minute, another gallery worker, dropping off supplies. But it was enough to scatter the air, to make us both step back like nothing had been there to begin with. When the door shut again, Clara exhaled, barely a sound. I wanted to say something that would pull us back to whatever we'd almost fallen into, but she was already reaching for the painting, steadying herself with the work. "You came here for something," she said without looking up. "Just wanted to see the gallery. I didn't know you'd be here." She smirked faintly. "You always say that." Later, I found myself helping her move canvases. The gallery had emptied, evening light turning the air gold and quiet. She worked methodically, sleeves rolled again, fingertips smudged with paint. I noticed how the small muscles in her wrist moved when she turned a brush, how her hair kept slipping from its clip. I shouldn't have been noticing. Not like that. Her son, my friend, used to talk about how she'd stopped dating after the divorce, said she was done with all that. I remembered seeing her in those years, kind but distant, smiling without warmth. It had bothered me, though I couldn't explain why. Now, being near her again, I understood. She wasn't cold. She was protecting herself. Maybe that's what drew me closer. "You didn't stay long at the party last night," I said, just to fill the silence. She gave a small shrug. "Too loud. Too young." Then she glanced at me. "Present company excluded, I suppose?" I smiled. "You make that sound like a warning." "Maybe it is." She was standing so near I could see the faint line at the corner of her mouth, the soft crease that came from years of holding in words she didn't say. My hand brushed her arm when I reached for the canvas beside her. She didn't move away. The contact was brief, a second, maybe two, but enough to make my heartbeat stumble. She noticed that, too. Her eyes flicked toward my hand, then back to mine. "Careful," she said quietly. "The paint's still wet." "I wasn't touching the painting," I replied. A pause. Then the smallest smile. "I know." We didn't speak for a while after that. Just worked side by side, the rhythm of breathing and movement the only sound. At one point, she leaned closer to inspect a frame and her shoulder brushed my chest. I felt her inhale, sharp, almost imperceptible, before she stepped back. I wanted to say her name, just to hear how it would sound in the empty room. But something about the quiet felt too intimate to break. Instead, I picked up the last painting, setting it gently against the wall. She turned to face me, tired, a little flushed, strands of hair falling loose. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to help. I wanted to." For a moment, neither of us looked away. Her gaze softened, uncertain, then dropped to my hand resting on the edge of the frame. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out, not to take it, just to let her fingers hover near mine. The space between us felt like a secret neither of us had decided to tell yet. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "You really shouldn't find me so easily." But she didn't move. And I didn't either. The next evening, I told myself I was just stopping by to return the gallery keys I'd borrowed. That was true, technically. But when I saw the light on inside, spilling warm against the blue dusk, I knew I was lying to myself again. She was there, as always, bent over the same canvas, brush poised midair like she was afraid to finish it. "You again," she said when I stepped in, a faint smile tugging at her mouth. "You left the light on," I said. "Maybe I was waiting for you to notice." The words hung between us, neither playful nor serious, just true enough to sting. The evening stretched quietly. She worked, I watched, pretending to rearrange some frames. Every now and then, she'd pass by me, close enough that her sleeve brushed my hand. It wasn't accidental anymore. "Eli," she said once, voice low. "You shouldn't, I know." But she didn't finish the sentence, and I didn't move away. When she finally turned, our faces were too close. I could see the small flecks of paint on her cheek, the faint tremor in her jaw. Her breath was warm, close enough that I felt it on my skin. Then, a sudden vibration, my phone lighting up on the table. Her son's name flashing on the screen. She glanced at it, then at me. Something fragile passed through her eyes. Guilt. Fear. Memory. "You should answer," she whispered. "I can't," I said too quietly. Her hand lifted as if to reach for the phone, but stopped midway, fingers curling into her palm. "He still doesn't know you're working here, does he?" "No." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. A soft thud echoed, the sound of footsteps outside. Someone trying the door. Clara tensed instantly, every part of her still except her eyes. "It's probably just the night guard," I said, but I wasn't sure. We stood motionless until the steps faded. When she finally exhaled, it came out shaky, uneven. I didn't think, I just reached for her hand. She let me. Her fingers were cold from the turpentine, but her grip was firm, like she needed the steadiness more than she'd admit. "This is wrong," she said, not pulling away. "I know," I said again. Her laugh was short, breathless. "You keep saying that." She turned slightly, our joined hands brushing against her waist. For a split second, her head tilted toward me, slow, uncertain. I felt her breath again, her lips close enough to count the seconds between us. But she stopped. Her forehead barely touched mine, and in that tiny contact was everything we couldn't say out loud: the wanting, the fear, the ache of it all. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the window. She pulled back just before the light caught us. Her voice was a whisper, almost pleading. "You need to go." I didn't move. She took my hand again, this time not to hold it, but to press it back against my chest. "Please!" Our eyes met once more, too long, too knowing, before I finally stepped away. At the door, I turned back. She was still standing there, motionless, lips parted as if she'd been about to say something but changed her mind. The space between us had never felt smaller. Or more dangerous. The rain had returned, steady, unhurried, the kind that soaked through the world quietly. I wasn't supposed to see her again that night. I'd told myself that a dozen times. But my feet still found the way to the gallery. Through the window, she stood alone, arms folded, the lamplight painting her in gold and shadow. Her hair was loose this time, damp from the weather, the strands dark against her skin. She looked younger somehow, or maybe just more real, less untouchable. When she saw me at the door, she didn't smile. "You shouldn't be here, Eli." "I know," I said, and stepped inside anyway. She turned away, pretending to busy herself with the brushes on the table. "This isn't fair," she murmured. "Not to me. Not to you. Then tell me to leave." She hesitated. The pause lasted too long. When she finally spoke, her voice had softened. "You wouldn't listen." "I would." Her laugh was quiet, bitter. "You're too young to mean that. I'm old enough to know when something feels right." Her breath caught, so faint I almost missed it. She turned then, meeting my eyes, something fierce flickering there beneath the restraint. "You think this is right?" she asked. "Me, hiding behind locked doors with my son's friend?" I stepped closer. "I didn't say simple." Her gaze dropped to my chest, to where my jacket was still damp. She reached out, maybe out of habit, to brush the raindrops away. But her hand lingered. Just long enough for the gesture to stop being practical. "Clara," I said quietly. She didn't answer. Her fingers moved up, slow, tentative, tracing a line along the edge of my collar. I could smell her perfume, faint and warm, the same one I remembered from years ago, back when she was someone's wife, someone untouchable. I wanted to touch her back, but the space between wanting and daring felt impossibly wide. Then she looked up. "Do you have any idea what this would do to him? To us?" Her words were sharp, but her hand didn't move. "I think about it all the time," I said. "Every reason not to be here. And yet you are. So are you." The silence that followed was heavy, not empty, but full of all the things we couldn't unfeel. She stepped closer, until her breath brushed against my neck. Her voice dropped, barely audible. "You don't know what you're doing." "I do," I whispered. Her forehead came to rest against mine. I could feel her trembling, the faint unevenness of her breathing, the way her fingers tightened slightly at the edge of my sleeve. For a moment neither of us moved. The world outside faded, the rain, the hum of the heater, even the sound of our own restraint cracking. Then she said it, quiet, raw, almost broken. "I haven't wanted anyone in a long time." My breath caught. "And now?" She didn't answer. Just tilted her head, lips parting, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her exhale. Her hand slid to the back of my neck. And then, a sharp knock at the door. Both of us froze. The sound came again, louder this time. Her hand fell away. Outside, a voice called her name. Her son's. Her son's voice at the door changed everything. He was calling from the hallway, muffled by the rain, casual, unaware of the silence pressed flat inside. I stepped back fast, nearly tripping on the edge of a frame. Clara's hand shot out, catching my wrist. Her grip was quick, almost desperate. Don't say anything, she whispered. Her breath brushed my cheek, close enough to make it worse. She turned toward the door, voice steady now. 1 second! I stood frozen, heart hammering. She glanced back once, the look sharp, pleading. Then she went to unlock it. He stepped in, shaking water from his jacket. Mom, I thought you'd gone home. I was just finishing up, she said lightly, too quickly. Eli dropped off some tools I needed. I tried to nod, to play along, but his eyes flicked toward me. Something in them shifted, a half-second too long of a look. Not suspicion, not yet. Just a recognition that didn't belong there. He smiled anyway. Man, you're here more than me lately. Guess I like the quiet, I said, forcing a laugh. He chuckled and turned away, but Clara didn't. Her fingers brushed her necklace, a nervous tick I'd never seen before. When he finally left, the door closing behind him, she sagged against the table like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "He knows something." "He doesn't," I said. She shook her head. "You didn't see his face. He knows." The air between us felt brittle. I stepped toward her, but she held up a hand. "Eli, stop." "I can't," I said quietly. "You're acting like this is just." She turned sharply. "It isn't just anything. Don't you understand what this would do to him? To you?" Her voice cracked. The strength she usually wore like armor slipped. I saw the fear under it, raw, human. "Then tell me to leave," I said again. "Really tell me." She didn't. Instead, she sank into the nearest chair, hands trembling slightly. I crouched beside her, instinctively, my hand hovering before touching her knee, light, hesitant. "Clara," I said. She looked at me then, eyes wet, unfocused. "You think this started here, don't you?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, swallowed hard. "You used to come by with him, remember? Years ago. You'd sit at the counter while I cooked. You never talked much then." I nodded, unsure where she was going. "I used to watch you," she said. "You'd barely look up, but I noticed the way you listened, the way you tried to disappear." The words hit me like a bruise forming slowly. "You." She smiled weakly. "You weren't the only one who noticed something." For a heartbeat, the world tilted, the years collapsing, the distance rewriting itself. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because," she said, standing suddenly, "you deserve to know this wasn't a mistake for me." Then, almost in the same breath, she added, "And that's exactly why it has to stop." She brushed past me, too close, her shoulder grazing mine. The contact burned. At the door, she paused, her voice low, trembling. "Don't come back tomorrow." I wanted to ask if she meant it. But she didn't turn around. Only her reflection in the glass, her hand pressed against it for a moment too long, before she walked out into the rain. And I knew then, whatever happened next, either of us could go back to pretending that I stayed away for a week. Tried to fill the hours with music, noise, anything that would keep her voice from echoing back in my head. But everything reminded me of her, the rain on the window, the faint smell of varnish, the shape of a half-finished song I couldn't bring myself to complete. By the 7th night, I gave up pretending. The gallery was dark, closed. Still, the door was unlocked, as if she'd been expecting me. Clara stood near the back wall, hands buried in the pockets of her coat. She didn't look surprised. "I told you not to come back," she said. "I know. Then why are you here?" I hesitated, searching for the right words, then said the only true thing I had. "Because I can't stop." She looked down, exhaled slowly. The sound was almost a sigh. "You think this ends with something good for either of us?" "No," I said. "But it ends with something real." That made her look at me. Her eyes were tired, rimmed red, but alive in a way I hadn't seen before. "I tried to forget you," she whispered. "You kept showing up in the quiet." She took a small step closer, and I felt the shift in the air, warmth pushing against distance. "You make it sound like that's a bad thing," I said. "It is," she murmured. "Because it means I've already lost." The storm outside thickened, thunder rolling low. She moved toward me, slow but certain, her breath shallow, uneven. "I'm not supposed to want this," she said, her voice trembling. "Not you. Not like this." Her hand lifted, hovering near my chest before stopping. I covered it with mine, the contact electric and impossibly still. "Then stop me," I said. Her eyes searched mine, for reason, for restraint, for something to save us both. Whatever she found wasn't enough. She stepped closer. The distance between us collapsed. Her forehead rested against mine, the rhythm of her breath matching mine, fragile and urgent. "Eli," she whispered, almost breaking on my name. "Say it," I breathed. She closed her eyes. "I can't." "You already did." The moment stretched, too long, too dangerous. I could feel every pulse, every tremor that said don't and do at the same time. Her hand slid up, brushed the back of my neck, not possessive, not certain, just lost. I tilted my head enough to meet her halfway, and for a second we hovered there, suspended between restraint and surrender. Then she pulled back, tears catching in the lamplight. "No," she said softly. "Not like this." Her voice broke, but her eyes didn't. "I need to remember this as something I chose, not something I fell into." I nodded, though every part of me wanted to argue. "Then choose." She did. She leaned in, not for a kiss, but for a slow, trembling touch of her hand against my cheek. Her thumb traced the corner of my mouth, memorizing it. "I'll think about you," she said. "Every time I look at something I can't fix." And just like that, the storm eased. I stepped back first. Not because I wanted to, but because she needed me to. Our eyes met one last time. No promises. No lies. Just understanding. She smiled faintly, the kind that hurt to see. "You always did know how to find me." "Maybe that's the problem," I said. And when I left, she didn't stop me. But she didn't turn away either. Winter came fast along the coast. The wind carried salt through the narrow streets, the sky soft with pale light. The gallery stayed closed for a while. "Renovations," the sign said, though I knew it was really just her way of catching her breath. I didn't see Clara for 3 months. Not at the grocery store, not by the cafe she liked, not even through the window of her car parked by the pier. And maybe that was for the best. I told myself distance was what she wanted, maybe even what I needed. Still, I kept thinking of her. The sound of her laugh when she tried not to. The way she'd trace her thumb along the edge of a coffee cup when she was thinking. The silence that lived between us, full of everything we hadn't said. It was early March when I found her again, or maybe when she let me. She was standing on the pier, hair pulled back, coat buttoned to the collar. The sea behind her was restless, gray and endless. She didn't turn when I approached, she just spoke softly, like she'd been waiting for the words to arrive. "I thought if I stayed away long enough, it would fade." "Did it?" I asked. She shook her head, smiling just a little. "You're still here, aren't you?" I stepped closer. The air between us still had that same quiet pull, not sharp anymore, but something gentler. "Real." "I kept thinking about that night," she said, eyes on the horizon. "How close I came to forgetting myself." "You didn't," I said. "I almost did," she admitted. Then she looked at me, her gaze steady, tender in a way that made my chest ache. "And that scared me. Not because of you, but because I remembered what it felt like to want something again." The wind caught her hair, loosening a strand across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached up and brushed it back. She didn't pull away. "Clara," I said quietly, "you don't have to keep pretending this is something we should be ashamed of." She let out a slow breath, eyes softening. "Maybe not. But it's something we'll have to carry carefully." "I can do careful." "I know." We stood like that for a long time, the sea roaring beneath us, the rest of the world distant and blurred. When she finally turned toward me, the smile she gave wasn't sad this time. Just honest. "Come on," she said. "Walk me home." I offered my hand, and she took it, tentative at first, then sure. Her fingers fit against mine like something familiar, something that had been waiting for the right moment to return. We didn't talk much as we walked. There didn't seem to be anything left to explain. At her door, she stopped, looking up at me. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, the space between us gone. Then she reached forward, her hand resting lightly against my chest. "Eli," she whispered, smiling softly, "you always did know how to find me. And this time, I didn't have to leave.